You walked into the room and something shifted. You didn't say anything. You didn't do anything. You just arrived. And within 30 seconds, somebody got defensive. Somebody got quiet. Somebody started talking too loud, too fast, trying to fill the air around you like they were afraid of what you might hear in the silence. This happens to you everywhere. The coffee shop, the family dinner, the Zoom call where one person keeps cutting you off before you finish a sentence. You've spent years thinking it was you. Something about your face, something about your energy. Maybe you're too intense. Maybe you give off weird vibes. Maybe you should smile more, talk less, take up less space. And so you shrunk. You softened. You became the version of yourself other people seemed to want. And somehow, you still made them uncomfortable. Carl Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He didn't stop there. He noticed that certain people, by their very presence, force others to confront what they haven't accepted in themselves. Not through words, not through judgment, just by existing in a state of unusual awareness. That's what's actually happening to you. You're not too much. You're not off. You're a specific kind of empath, what some have come to call a Sophia empath, and your nervous system is tuned to a frequency most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You see the unspoken thing. You feel the lie underneath the smile. You walk into a room and the room reorganizes itself around what you know before you say a word. For the next 25 minutes, I want to sit with you and explain why this keeps happening. Why your kindness has been mistaken for threat. Why your stillness has been mistaken for arrogance. Why people who once said they loved you slowly disappeared. And what it really means to carry this kind of soul through a world that wasn't built for it. Stay with me. This one might explain something you've been trying to name for years. Here's something nobody warned you about. The more present you become, the more people want to escape you. Not because you're harsh, not because you're cold, because you're showing up at a level they aren't ready to meet. Think about the last time you sat across from someone and just listened. Really listened. No phone, no agenda, no rush to fix or interrupt. You watched their eyes. You heard the small crack in their voice when they got to the part of the story they usually skip. And somewhere around minute 6, they got nervous. They started laughing too quickly. They reached for their drink. They changed the subject. You did everything right. That was the problem. Most people walk through their lives surrounded by polite distraction, conversations that stay in the shallow end, eye contact that breaks at exactly the right moment, a whole social architecture designed to keep the soul under wraps. And then there's you, paying attention in a way that wasn't part of the agreement. Jung had a word for the public face we wear. He called it the persona, the mask the world can deal with in manageable pieces. Behind the persona sits the shadow, the rejected material, the grief we never named, the rage we swallowed at age 7, the part of ourselves we decided was too dangerous to keep on the dinner table. Most people negotiate a lifetime truce with their own shadow by avoiding anyone who might reflect it back. You are that reflection. You didn't volunteer for the job. You don't even want it most days. When you walk into a room, you are doing nothing more aggressive than perceiving accurately. But accurate perception, in a world built on careful blindness, lands like confrontation. You haven't said a single critical word. You've simply refused, without effort, without strategy, to participate in the agreement that everyone is going to pretend. Imagine how that lands inside another nervous system. They're standing there in their polished surface, fully invested in being who they've told everyone they are. And across from them is someone whose attention seems to pass right through that surface. They don't have words for what just happened. They only know they feel exposed. And so they reach for the oldest defense available. They decide there's something wrong with you. You've been called intense, intimidating, a lot. Too sensitive, too serious, hard to read. People who barely know you have offered unsolicited diagnoses of your personality. Family members have told you, with a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, that you overthink everything. Friends have stopped texting back without saying why, and you've spent night after night replaying the conversation, trying to find the moment you went wrong. You didn't go wrong. You simply didn't dim. This is one of the hardest things to absorb because it sounds like vanity, and it isn't. It's neurology. It's archetype. Your perception is not a moral achievement. It's a structure you were born inside. The Sophia empath, and that word Sophia, comes from the Greek for wisdom, the kind that doesn't read books but reads rooms, carries a level of attunement the surrounding culture treats as suspicious by default. In the old myths, Sophia was the soul of the world. She saw through everything and was punished for it. She was called dangerous when she was simply awake. We tell those stories about gods and goddesses, but the same structure repeats in living rooms and break rooms and family group chats every single day. When somebody says you make them uncomfortable, they are almost never talking about what you did. They are talking about what they saw in themselves when you got close. That distinction is the entire game. You are not their discomfort. You are their mirror, and a mirror has no opinion about what it shows. There's a particular ache that lives in the soul of a Sophia empath, and it shows up at the strangest times. You'll be standing in line at the grocery store or driving home from work, and out of nowhere the name of someone you used to know will land in your chest like a small stone. You haven't spoken to them in years. You probably did nothing wrong. They just faded. And the faded ones are usually the people who once said you were the realest person they'd ever met. This is the part nobody tells you about empathic gifts. The closeness you offer is also the thing that drives people away. Not in some dramatic, made-for-television way, quietly, through canceled plans, through "we should catch up soon" that never materializes, through the slow drift of someone who used to text you every morning and now doesn't. You've taken this personally for years. You've assumed there must be some flaw in you that becomes visible after enough exposure, like a stain that only shows up in certain light. Jung wrote about something he called the wounded healer, the figure who heals not despite their wounds, but through them. He was talking about therapists in part, but the structure extends. There are people whose presence functions as medicine, and most people have a very limited tolerance for medicine. They want a small dose, a weekend retreat's worth of insight, a late-night conversation they can file under deep and return to their regular programming the next morning. When you offer the full prescription, when your presence consistently invites people into a more honest version of themselves, they take a few sips and run. Because real medicine, the kind that actually moves something inside you, also disturbs the room you've built for yourself. I want you to feel this for a minute. Think of the friend who told you, eyes wet, that no one had ever listened to her the way you did. The one who said she could finally breathe around you. 6 months later, she was avoiding your calls. You drove yourself half crazy trying to figure out what happened. The truth is closer to this. You became associated, in her nervous system, with the part of her life she wasn't ready to keep changing. Loving you meant continuing to grow, and growth after a certain point is exhausting. People will leave you not because you weren't enough, because you were. Every time they sat across from you, they remembered a version of themselves they couldn't quite go back to, and couldn't quite become either. You held up a future they weren't prepared to walk toward, and rather than walk toward it, they walked away from the one holding it up. This happens with friends, with lovers, with family members who suddenly grow distant after you start doing the work. Going to therapy, asking the real questions at the dinner table, refusing the role you used to play. The whole system around you reorganizes to put distance between itself and you, the one whose entire orientation is toward closeness, end up alone at the center of a slowly emptying room. There is no language for this kind of grief. It isn't betrayal, exactly. They didn't do anything specifically wrong. They didn't owe you a confrontation. They just couldn't stay. And you can't make somebody stay by becoming smaller, even though you've tried. God, you've tried. You've made yourself easier. You've stopped bringing up the hard topics. You've laughed at jokes that weren't funny. You've watched the version of you that they could tolerate slowly replace the version of you that you actually were. And still, eventually, they left. Here's the thing that took me a long time to understand, and that I want to offer you carefully. The leaving is not the failure. The shrinking is. Every time you compressed yourself to keep someone close, you signed a small contract against your own soul. And the soul, in Jung's framework, is not a metaphor. It's the part of you that knows what is true and will keep insisting on it, even when every other part of you is trying to negotiate. The relationships that have stayed in your life are the ones that could survive your full presence. Everyone else was always going to be temporary. You just didn't know that going in. When the people who said they loved you started disappearing, it wasn't because of who you were. It was because of who you wouldn't stop being. Here's a strange thing I want you to try. Take the criticism that has hurt you most in your life, the thing one person said, the thing you've never quite been able to shake, and ask yourself a question Jung would have asked. What if that wasn't actually about you? I don't mean this as a wellness platitude. I mean it as a mechanism. Jung described projection as one of the most powerful and least visible forces in human relationships. When somebody can't bear something about themselves, their cruelty, their cowardice, their hunger for power, the part of them that envies and resents and seethes, they unconsciously locate that quality in someone else. They see it in you. They feel it in you. They become utterly convinced you are the problem. The Sophia empath is one of the most projected onto figures alive because the empath's perceptual openness functions like a screen. You're standing there receiving signals from everyone around you. You're absorbing the texture of the room, and in that openness, people see what they brought into the room with them, and they assume it came from you. The colleague who told you that you were manipulative, has it ever occurred to you that the only manipulation in that office was happening on her side of the desk? The family member who calls you cold, distant, withholding, is that not exactly the climate she grew up in and recreated everywhere she went? The partner who accused you of being controlling, while controlling your time, your friends, your money, your access to your own perception of reality. You have spent years auditing yourself for these accusations. You've gone to therapy and tried to find the manipulative core inside you, the cold one, the controlling one. You have done so much honest self-examination that you have lost the ability to distinguish between your real flaws and the costumes other people kept dressing you in. This is one of the most exhausting features of empathic life. You take everything in. You take in the projection too. You wear it. You start to believe it. Because part of you is a child who learned very early that if the people around you were upset, it must somehow be because of you. You learned to scan for what other people needed before you learned to feel what you needed. You learned to feel responsible for moods that had nothing to do with you. And in adulthood, you have applied that childhood discipline to every accusation that came your way. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That sentence is famously true. But there's a quieter corollary that doesn't get quoted enough. Everything that irritates others about you can also be a map of them. The irritation is the data. The data was never about you. Imagine, just for a moment, releasing all of it. Imagine taking off, like a heavy coat, every diagnosis other people have laid on your shoulders. The intense, the too much, the narcissist, when you spent the entire relationship trying to figure out how to disappear gracefully. The selfish, when you were the only one who showed up at the hospital. Each one of these accusations was a shadow being parked on you because the person speaking couldn't bear to hold it themselves. This doesn't mean you're without flaw. You have your own real material to work with, and you know what it is because you've actually looked. The Sophia empath always looks. That's the whole problem. You've done more honest self-inventory in a single bad afternoon than some of your critics will do in a lifetime. So the work isn't more self-inventory, the work is discernment. The work is the ability to say, the moment somebody throws an accusation across the table, this one is mine, and this one is yours. And to set down the ones that aren't yours, without argument, without trying to convince anyone. The way you'd set down a package somebody mailed you by mistake. You will be amazed when you start doing this, how light you become, how much room opens up in your chest, how much energy you've been spending carrying material that wasn't yours to carry in the first place. The projection ends the moment you stop accepting deliveries. I want you to consider a possibility that might feel uncomfortable at first because it requires you to take yourself more seriously than you've been allowed to. What if the discomfort you create in other people isn't a malfunction in you? What if it's the point? In every spiritual tradition that has ever existed, there is a figure who walks into the village and makes people nervous. The prophet, the hermit returning from the desert, the teacher whose silence in the corner of the room is louder than anyone else's speech. These figures aren't loud. They aren't aggressive. They aren't doing anything that should, by any rational measure, threaten anyone. and yet their presence reorganizes the village. What I'm about to say is not flattery. It is a description of a mechanism that has been operating in your life since you were a child. You are one of these figures, not in a grandiose way, not in a guru with followers way, in a small, daily, unglamorous way. You walk into a family system and the family system shifts. You sit down at a work meeting and the meeting becomes more honest, or it shuts down entirely. You start a conversation at a party, and within 15 minutes you are the person somebody is whispering their real life to in the corner. This is not because you have powers. It is because most people are performing, and you are not, and your non-performance is a kind of invitation. The invitation is sometimes accepted and sometimes punished. Jung talked about individuation, the lifelong work of becoming the person you actually are, as opposed to the person you were assembled to be. Most people never undertake this work, not because they are weak, but because the social cost is enormous. To individuate, you have to grieve the version of yourself everyone around you was counting on. You have to disappoint people. You have to lose roles you played well. You have to discover, sometimes in your 40s, that you have no idea what you actually want, because you have spent decades wanting what was wanted of you. When somebody who is undertaking this work walks into a room of people who aren't, something happens at a level beneath language. The non-individuated soul senses the individuating one and feels both attracted and threatened. Attracted because there is freedom in the air. Threatened because freedom is terrifying when you've spent your life paying rent on a self that isn't yours. That is what your presence is doing. You are inviting. You are not insisting. You are not preaching. You are simply walking through your life with a degree of self-honesty that creates an opening. And some people walk through the opening, and some people slam it shut and call you a name on the way out. Both responses are about them. I want you to take this seriously, because I think you've spent years trying to figure out how to be smaller, gentler, more palatable, and you've been working on the wrong problem. The problem was never your size. The problem is that there is no version of you small enough to relieve someone else of their own work, and trying to find that version has been slowly killing you. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from making yourself useful by becoming invisible. The empath knows this exhaustion intimately. You spent your 20s, your 30s, maybe your whole life in service of other people's comfort. You became fluent in detecting tension and dissolving it. You became the person everyone called when their world fell apart, and you became in the process almost invisible to yourself. You could tell anyone what they needed in a given moment. If somebody had asked you what you needed, you would have stood there blank, possibly with tears in your eyes you couldn't account for. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. You have spent your life being the catalyst in other people's chemistry, and you have rarely been allowed to be the substance that gets transformed. It is your turn now. It has been your turn for a long time. The discomfort you create in others is not your problem to solve. It is information they have been given, free of charge, by your presence, and what they do with it is up to them. Some will rise, some will leave, some will project. Some will, after years of distance, find their way back and tell you that meeting you was one of the most important things that ever happened to them. You don't have to wait for them to come back. You don't have to keep proving you were harmless. You only have to keep going, in the direction your soul has been pointing for as long as you can remember, even when the direction is lonely. You were never too much. You were exactly the right amount for a self the world hadn't earned yet. So I want you to do something with me before this ends. Wherever you are sitting right now, in your car, in your kitchen, at your desk after a long day, I want you to take a breath. Not a deep one, not a performative one, just a real one. Notice that you are here. Notice that you have made it to this point in your life, carrying everything you have carried, often alone, often misunderstood, often quietly heartbroken by the gap between how much you have offered and how little has come back. Notice also that you are still here, that the part of you that knew, even as a child, that something was off about the agreement the world wanted you to sign, that part of you has been with you the whole time. It has cost you friendships. It has cost you romantic relationships. It has cost you, sometimes, your place at family tables. But it has also kept something alive in you that most people lose by the time they're 30. A kind of unbroken contact with what is real. That contact is the most valuable thing you have. It is the thing that, on the worst night of someone else's life, made you the person they called. It is the thing that, in the middle of a meeting where everyone is performing, makes one person catch your eye because they recognized something. It is the thing that has kept you from settling, even when settling was offered to you on a silver platter. I'm not going to tell you that, from now on, everything will be easier. I would be lying. The world is not suddenly going to organize itself around the gifts of the Sophia empath. People are still going to project on you. Some friends are still going to drift. There will be rooms where your presence is going to make somebody clutch their drink a little tighter and decide, for reasons they will never articulate to themselves, that you are not someone they want to know. But here is what does change. You stop translating yourself for them. You stop carrying the projections home and sleeping with them under the pillow. You stop interpreting every withdrawal as proof of your unworthiness. You start to recognize, in the small daily moments, that the discomfort you sometimes create is not your shame to manage. It is their introduction to themselves, and they can take it or leave it. There are people out there, and there are more of them than you think, who are looking for exactly what you bring. They are tired of performance. They are tired of small talk. They have done their own work, and when they meet you, they recognize, almost immediately, that they are in the presence of someone who has done theirs. These people are your real life. The rest was practice. If anything in this video reached the part of you that needed to hear it tonight, I'm grateful you stayed with me until the end. This channel is a slow conversation about the soul, about Jung, about what it actually takes to live as a feeling person in a world that mostly isn't. If you'd like to keep walking together, you can subscribe, and the next time something like this lands on your feed, you'll know where to find it. But more than anything, I want you to close this video, look up, and take one ordinary moment back into your real life with the quiet knowledge that you are not broken. You never were. You were simply early. You were tuned to a station most people couldn't pick up yet. And the only thing left to do, now, is to keep playing. Take care of yourself out there.